Hey friends, welcome back to another week of meals. On this particular night, I had pulled out some things from the fridge, freezer, and pantry that needed to be used up. I also started a batch of pork chops in the sous vide. These were pre-seasoned. I had seasoned them and sliced them and placed them in the freezer after I purchased them from Sam's. I was in the mood to make potatoes au gratin on this particular night. I am not sure I've ever even made them. It was a frequent dish when I was growing up, although I'm pretty sure it usually came from a box, which is still totally good. But I have a lot of potatoes in the pantry, and I decided I didn't have time to make authentic potatoes au gratin in the oven where you just slice them thin and layer them in your casserole dish. So I thought I'm going to do a makeshift version of this in the skillet and then just pop the skillet in the oven to kind of melt the cheese on top when we're finished. So I had sauteed some onions in butter and peeled and shredded 5 potatoes, I think it was, and added them to the skillet. Now, it drives me nuts that raw potatoes stick so badly to the bottom of pans. Not quite as badly with this dish as it did that stainless steel pot from last week, but it was still a bit of a mess. So I had these in the skillet on medium-high heat, and I really just wanted to get them soft and just to the point where they were no longer raw. I added a little butter and salt and then about a cup or a cup and a half of milk. I stirred it around and then just put a lid on it in order to allow those potatoes to soak up the milk and butter. I was really excited about this dish. While the potatoes cooked on the stovetop, I decided that I was going to use the zucchini to make a surprise for my kids. One of our favorite summer traditions is to take the first few ripe zucchini from the garden and fry them. We don't fry things very often in our house, so it's a real treat. I like to season my slices of zucchini with homemade ranch seasoning, and then I dip them in egg wash. Sometimes I dip them in flour first, then egg wash, and then Italian breadcrumbs. But I think on this night I just did egg wash and the breadcrumbs. I have the sweetest memories of spending a few weeks in the summer with my grandparents in Arkansas, and they had a neighbor down the street who lived right on the lake who had a massive garden. Every summer while I was there would be a big fish fry with fresh veggies from the garden and usually either fried zucchini or fried green tomatoes. I topped those potatoes with shredded cheddar and popped them in the oven for just a few minutes to melt the cheese on top. You can see it is still piping hot when I served it. This meal was a huge hit. The next night, I decided to make barbecue chicken drumsticks and quiche using up some veggies that we already had. One thing about growing your own food is you have to make sure that you're going to use it, and particularly the things that are produced in bulk, like eggs if you have backyard chickens, and all sorts of potatoes, which tend to grow very easily. I love having a huge repertoire of recipes to make with potatoes and eggs because those are 2 of the most easily produced things on our farm. Thankfully, my family does like quiche, and you can make it in so many different ways. I've made ham and cheese, sausage with ricotta or Parmesan. Of course, there's traditional quiche Lorraine, but on this night, I decided to do just cheese and chopped veggies. I was using what we already had in the fridge, so I decided to make one without mushrooms and one with. There are quite a few of my kids who would prefer not to eat mushrooms, but my husband and Zoe and I enjoy them. I shredded cheddar as well as some Parmesan, and I like to add my cheese to my pie pans first after I've put the crust in. Then I layer my veggies, and as I am whisking my eggs, I add salt and pepper or even just homemade seasoned salt so that it's all seasoned and ready to eat when it comes out of the oven. Meals like this remind me of how I tend to overcomplicate dinner sometimes. Having a simple quiche and barbecue chicken drumsticks was such a simple meal to throw together. As everything was baking, I was able to clean up the kitchen as well as do some of the dishes for my child that's on dish duty for the week. If you've been around here for any amount of time, you know that one of my favorite habits is putting my kitchen to bed each evening. Waking up in the morning to a completely clean kitchen and all of the dishes are clean, or at the very least, the dishwasher is clean and ready to be emptied. It's a great way to start a day. These chicken drumsticks are so ridiculously simple. These were just straight from a big bag from the grocery store. I put them in the oven for the majority of the baking time, and then I pulled them out, brushed some barbecue sauce on them, and stuck them back in the oven for probably another 5 to 10 minutes. This meal reminds me of summer and makes me so excited for garden fresh veggies that are just a few months away. The next night, I decided to make chicken fajitas. I had had this quart bag of sliced bell peppers in the kitchen freezer for a few months, as well as a partial container of sliced mushrooms. Once I added half of a sliced onion, I got to work thinly slicing the chicken breast. Now, if you have seen any of my food prep videos, you know that when I bring a bunch of chicken home from the grocery store, I like to prep it to a degree. So that may mean cutting it into chunks for sweet and sour chicken, or pressure canning it to be used in things like chicken spaghetti and chicken pot pie. Or I may just freeze 4 or 5 chicken breasts in a gallon bag, and that is enough to feed my family of currently 8 at home. For things like salsa chicken or chicken fajitas, and that is what I was doing on this particular night. I took these 5 chicken breasts out of the freezer the day before, and I'm just slicing them really thin, and then I'm going to mix up my homemade taco seasoning. There isn't really a recipe for this. Over the years, I've just been winging it. I typically add about a teaspoon each of salt, pepper, paprika, cumin, onion powder, and garlic powder, and then about 2 heaping tablespoons of chili powder. I mix all of that together and then sprinkle it over the chicken and the vegetables. Once the chicken and veggies are well seasoned and combined, I will stick the chicken in the oven for the first 10 or 15 minutes before I add the vegetables. One thing that I kind of forgot about when I decided to put this on the menu is that we have long since been out of store-bought tortillas. Not to worry, I was able to whip some up from scratch. I will put the recipe that I like to use in the description below. While I've never found a complicated tortilla recipe, there are quite a few variations out there. These are just flour tortillas, not corn, but I personally have found using butter as your fat instead of an oil produces the best flavor and texture. Next, we let our dough rest for 15 to 20 minutes. And then we roll them out individually and cook them in a dry, medium-high cast iron skillet for really just about 15 to 30 seconds on each side. Just keep an eye out for bubbles, similar to when you're making pancakes. The only thing that would have made this meal even better is if I'd had some avocado, either just to slice or to make guacamole. There is something so delicious about adding guacamole to your fajitas. This next meal is so ridiculously simple. It is just cabbage and kielbasa. I had 2 heads of cabbage in the back of the fridge that were desperately needing to be used up, and 2 pounds of kielbasa that I had pulled from the freezer. I also had 1/2 of an onion left in the back of the fridge as well. Got to keep an eye out for those hiding leftovers so they don't go to waste. I sauteed the onions with the sliced kielbasa in a cast iron skillet over medium heat. I have a pretty bad reputation for over browning the kielbasa, and by over browning I mean burning some sides. So I tried to be careful with this one. I didn't get a picture of the finished product, but you get the idea. It was a quick and easy meal on a busy weeknight. This last night was date night, and my kids requested that I make pretzel rolls, which is something that I have not made in a couple of months at least. So they had what they needed to make BLTs, and I got to work on homemade pretzel rolls. I will include the recipe for this in the description below. If you've never made pretzel rolls before and you think you might like them, please give them a try. They're really good, and they really just kind of jazz up a basic sandwich. I don't know why I always share my filthy stovetop with you, but I guess I'm hoping some of you are like me and enjoy a good before and after. My stovetop gets used multiple times every day, and it looks like this, well, the before part, pretty much every 2 days at least. Now the finished product is nice and clean, just in time to get it dirty again. But right now, all I'm doing is preparing a pot of boiling water with half a cup of baking soda, and we are going to use that to boil our pretzel rolls before we stick them in the oven, only for about 10 seconds on each side. Otherwise, they end up with a bit of a metallic taste. At least that's what I've always read. Thankfully, I have never experienced that myself. I do let the dough rise in the oven first before I shape them into the rolls. And then once I've shaped them into rolls, I don't let them rise again. I go ahead and dip them in the boiling water and then score them, add the pretzel salt, and then immediately put them in an oven for 350 degrees for about 15 to 20 minutes. I just keep an eye on them until they look like this. You can see the ones on the right were in the oven a few minutes longer than the ones on the left. The left could have been in there for a couple more minutes, but these were good. My kids enjoyed their sandwiches while my husband and I went out for a date night. I am thinking I am going to modify my participation in the Pantry Challenge for the month of February. I will talk about that when I share my grocery haul with you in a few days. But I hope this gave you a few meal ideas, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.